Serious, what is your most terrifying we need to leave now random rush of fear you felt? In high school my buddy and I were riding our dirt bikes on the trails that ran around the logging roads in southwestern WA. Thousands and thousands of acres of undeveloped land with just gravel logging roads and trails. We were on our way back to the truck when we stopped at an intersection to figure out which way to turn. 3 dudes in overalls, no shirts and full face helmets rode out of the woods on quads. They rode a few slow circles around us then took off back into the woods. We booked the duck out of there. Turns out all that undeveloped land is also good for growing, cooking, and dumping. Edit for typo. Similar thing while I was camping with some friends in a national forest. A group of 10 dudes on dirt bikes rolled past our camp, stopped 50 yards away, but didn't take their helmets off, and stood there and stared at us for a few minutes. It was 7 miles to the trailhead, 7 more miles to a paved road and 10 miles more to a town. I had bear spray, but in that moment I realized I could die, and there was a good chance I'd never be found. My car was stolen the very night I moved into my new house in a very good neighborhood. The neighbors had warned us that the neighborhood was being targeted at the time. They mentioned a woman around the corner that opened the door for knockers in the middle of the night and they attacked her and robbed her and almost killed her. We had reported the car stolen and did the police reports when it happened. Well, 2 nights later in the middle of the night I hear a knock on the door and they said open up, it's the police. Well, since I had heard the story about the other lady, I was suspicious and did not answer. I grabbed my kids and put them in my daughter's room because it had access to the roof from the window. I called the police to say that 2 men claiming to be police are pounding on my door. They said there was no police in the area and they are sending a car. Turns out, these same guys stole the car and came back for seconds. I did get my car back because they brought it with. One of the times I ran away from my abusive mother, I was hiding out at an internet cafe. For context, I was 12. I'd been there for a few days and the guy running the show overnight knew me and knew what was going on at home because I'd laid it on him a few months earlier when he was like, hey, it's 2 AM, don't you need to go home? He didn't care about me especially, but he didn't care enough to kick me out either, so long as I wasn't causing any trouble. He'd let me sleep under one of the desks at the back etc, since it was always quiet as overnight. Anyway, this night I was just hanging out the back of the cafe bored with nothing to do, and my brain was like Geo to the bathroom, but I didn't need to pee or anything, so I was like up, and then my brain was more urgent Geo to the bathroom now, so I was like okay and did. Went into a stall and just kinda stood there for a few minutes confused then went back out. The guy on the front desk comes over and was like, dude, someone just came in asking if I'd seen you. Said it was your mother after a cycle of running away, getting caught, running away again. I finally got away from her and had CPS take my allegations seriously 2 years later and moved a different city, but moved back about 5 years ago. I'm not really a believer in psychic links etc, but since I've been back I've sometimes had this feeling in myself like a deep dread, and then I look around and see my mother walking down the road across the street or driving past me or something. I was getting a coffee about 6 months back and got that feeling, so looked around just in time to see her walking into the store. At a summer camp, a buddy of mine and I climbed out onto a tin roof of a big hall that was built on the side of a steep hill. On one side you could climb out right onto the roof, on the other side it was a 3-story fall onto concrete. Being teenage idiots, we climbed from the low side over the peak of the sloped metal roof and were inching down towards the edge of the high side. We had sneakers on and had pretty solid footing, so it wasn't outrageously dangerous. Then, out of absolute nowhere, raindrops started falling. We both look at each and realize this is really bad and try to start backing up, but wherever there is even the slightest dampness, the metal is now completely slick. There is nothing to hold on to. The grip of the rubber shoes on dry metal was all we had. I look at him and see the panic in his eyes that I'm feeling too. We are trying to move up this roof as fast as we can, and the raindrops are falling harder every second. I see him break completely free and start sliding down with his eyes frozen in terror. Somehow, miraculously, he stops sliding. I made it to the top, scrambled down, grabbed a branch, and leaned back over the top, trying to give him something to grab. He eventually makes it high enough to grab the branch, and I pull him up and over. I have never felt panic like that. We were so lucky to make it out of there. When me and 2 of my cousins went camping with our family, probably about 8 to 9 years old, we stayed in a campground that had a playground near our spot. We would often go, just the 3 of us, to play and go back to our camper when it started to get dark, because it wasn't too far. But one day we were playing, and we weren't the only kids there, but this man, Fortis, came up to us with a dog and started talking to my cousins, and they were very trusting. He kept asking them if they wanted hot dogs or cookies and where they were from, and telling us that his camper was just over there if we wanted snacks. This guy gave me a super weird vibe immediately, so I looked at my cousins after being quiet the whole time and said, I think I hear grandma yelling for us. Dinner is probably ready, and they argued and were confused, but after I gave them the back quote look, they just shrugged and listened to me. That guy gave me the heebie-jeebies, and we never saw him again after that day. When I was a preteen, a strange man stopped and asked me for directions. That didn't make sense. As I'm trying to help him, a van rolls up and the side door opens. I just booked it and never looked back. Once when I was about 11, I think, I was walking to my sister's house. This kinda nervous, kinda sketchy looking guy stopped me and asked for directions to a street 1 block over. Now, sure, people sometimes get lost when they are super close to their destination, but he was going to the main street in our district. Everyone knew where that street was. I tell him, already suspicious of what this guy wants, and then he nervously says, how much? Me, being ducking 11. Go what? How much? For 1 hour. Sex. As I was only 1 street away from my sister, I bolted out of there, not looking behind me. He asked a kid how much she was willing to prostitute herself for. Admittedly, some kids do dress way more mature than they are. I, however, did not. I wore whatever my mother was willing to buy me, and that particular day it was an oversized fleece sweater, ratty jeans and super cheap sneakers. I looked like a kid. Went to a movie on Halloween when I was in high school with my boyfriend at the time. It was a huge theater where there was a staircase all the way to the top row that opened in the middle of the row, so you could sit on either side of the opening. My boyfriend and I sat in the back row on one side of the opening. We were watching the movie, and around 30 to 40 minutes after the movie started, a guy walked in by himself wearing a big sweater and sat on the other side of the opening. He didn't really do anything at first, but he gave me a bad feeling, and I felt uncomfortable, but I continued watching the movie. I noticed the guy seemed really nervous and wasn't paying any attention to the movie. I really couldn't figure out why, but he was stressing me out big time, and I just felt like we had to get the duck out of there. I told my boyfriend that I was probably being silly, but I wanted to leave. As we were leaving, we informed the staff about the guy just in case. Turns out they had been looking for him, as people had reported seeing a guy of that description behaving strangely in the parking lot earlier. The police came, and he apparently had quite a few large hunting knives hidden under his sweatshirt. My mom and I were walking our dog on a semi-secluded dried up riverbed. For context, I was probably 7 or 8. A couple approached us, and instantly something in my gut told me that they weren't safe. The man asked some weird question like, "Is it just you and your daughter here?" and then proceeded to say that he took pictures of kids for a living, and that he would love to have me model for him. I didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation, because after that I took off, and I'm ashamed to admit, left my mom and dog behind with the creepy guy. My mom was livid, saying how rude I was, and how worried she was, because she didn't know where I went, but the intense leave now feeling that came over me totally clouded any sort of reasoning. One night when I was very young, and at a bar, I got quite drunk. Some guy propositioned me to go back to his place, and I was up for it. I left my car, cause he told me to just ride in, since I had been drinking so much, and we went riding down the road. It was quite a ways, and I started to question him where we were going. He said it was just up the road on the river. He pulls over to the side of US 1 and points to a 2-story house on the river. It was very dark and the only light was of the moon. We walked down the dock to get to the front door. He gets in front of me and is playing with the door knob, and as he pushes it open, he turns to me and says, "Please don't make me turn the light on and let you see how dirty my place looks." So of course, drunk and stupid, I said no problem, and probably giggled. He guides me by the hand up a set of stairs. We get to the top and he says, "I just have a mattress on the floor, I hope you don't mind." And again, drunk and stupid me just sits down on the mattress, not thinking about anything. As I sit there in the dark, I start to get my vision becoming clearer. Everything looks off. The mattress has no sheet on it, and I hear a whisper in my ear, "Get out." I jumped up. I ran down the stairs. I ran out of the door and down the dock. I ran across US1 and up to a house that was across the street. I ran up to the door and started beating on the door and screaming for help. I turn and look, and the guy is running across US1 at me, chasing me. I start screaming more and more as now I'm afraid this house is abandoned. Right as the guy gets up about 10 feet away, the porch light turns on. The guy stops, turns around, and went back to his truck. Poor guy whose door I was beating on came out and saw me crumbled, crying on his porch. The sweet man got in his car and drove me back to the bar 20 miles away so that I could get my car. I never saw him again. I never even knew his name. But he saved my life. I know he did. I was a 13-year-old girl camping with my best friend and her mom by a lake. My friend's mom was not the world's best mother and allowed my friend to get drunk. I had one drink, so I was a little tipsy, but still had my wits about me. It was about 11 at night, and my very drunk friend randomly decided to go swimming. So I chased after her to keep an eye on her and make sure she didn't hurt herself. And God, I'm so glad I did. 2 men followed us out to the lake. We didn't notice until my friend and I had swam a few dozen yards into the water. The men were very drunk, stumbling with their beer bottles in hand. They were catcalling us as they waded into the water, getting closer and closer. My friend was so drunk and wanting so badly to seem cool to these grown-up drunk 13-year-olds aren't the most rational thinkers. At first, she tried to respond to their questions, but I knew something very bad would happen if we didn't get away, so I repeatedly whispered to her, "They're going to grape us. They're going to grape us. We need to leave. Now." I think that finally knocked some sense in her inebriated brain, and she agreed to swim towards the shore with me, away from the men. They called after us, asking where we were going, and my friend yelled, "Away from you." Back then, I second-guessed myself and wondered if maybe I had been a little dramatic. But now, as an adult, I realize just how much danger we were in, and I'm so thankful that 13-year-old me knew to trust her gut. My girlfriend and I were car camping in the woods, a nice spot by a rushing river. The evening had gone well, and we turned in for the night. Sometime later I wake up needing to pee. I do my business and head back to the tent. I'm sitting on the edge of the tent taking my shoes off when I see it. A vaguely human shape suddenly jumps out in my mind and I freeze. I stare through the dark at this shape, just silhouetted by the dim starlight, wondering if I'm seeing things or if someone is creeping on us. Then the shape moves. It rises up, becoming a larger outline partially blotted by the trees. There my mind screams at me. I whip into action, reaching for my knife with one hand while zipping the tent closed for some paltry barrier between me and it. It's then that I hear a noise over the rush of the river. Hey, wait for me. Apparently my girlfriend had come out after I did, and I just didn't realize it. The time I felt a small shark delicately scrape my foot with its teeth in its effort to curiously figure out what I was. Like it literally felt like it gently took my heel into its mouth, and I felt the barest brush of teeth all around my heel. It didn't break the skin. I didn't realize it was a shark, murky water, until I reflexively kicked and felt its sharky skin against the bottom of my foot. It felt like a small shark, so a juvenile of some species or maybe an adult Atlantic sharpnose, not sure. My mom told me my eyes got huge, and I looked at her like I wanted to nope right out of the ocean that second. I didn't go back in the water.